Hey everyone, Sean Carey with Migration Productions, and welcome back to Exploring the Natural World. Today I'm really excited to introduce this particular video because we have David Sibley as our guest. David Sibley obviously is the author of the Sibley Field Guide series. For many folks that are birders and interested in the natural world, David probably doesn't need an introduction. But nonetheless, we're here today at the Massachusetts Audubon Society's Museum of American Bird Art. And David has an exhibit that's here that you see some of the artwork behind me, and his new book, What It's Like to Be a Bird. So today's video is going to be an interview with David talking about not just his book, but the exhibit and just his experiences as an illustrator. And I hope you're going to enjoy today's video, and if you do, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos here on Exploring the Natural World. Thanks again, and now let's take a listen to David Sibley.
It's really a pleasure to be here at the Museum of American Bird Art. It's such a unique institution, and obviously the work that I do is it's wonderful to have a museum that's focused on this kind of work, all the incredible bird illustration, bird art that has been produced all over the world by so many really talented artists and illustrators. There's a wonderful collection here, and I'm thrilled to have a chance to show my work here. My goal in this book was to try to answer a lot of the most common questions that I hear about birds and to introduce people to the birds in a little bit more depth. My hope is that what people take away from this book and this exhibit is just a greater understanding, a sense of the miraculous things that are happening with the birds that we see around us every day. Awesome things going on in your backyard. I hope that the book and the paintings here will inspire people to dig a little deeper and get a better understanding of that, and a better understanding in that way of our own place in the natural world. I wanted to include more about what the birds were doing, more of the fascinating things that are going on in the birds' lives, and the amazing adaptations, abilities, and behavior of the birds. Along the way, to try to answer a lot of the common questions that I hear about birds, I decided I wanted to introduce all of the most familiar species across North America. Robins, crows, and also some, well, less common but well-known species like bald eagle, kingfisher, puffin, roadrunner, life-size illustrations and portraits of the birds in action, and also to try to really capture them at their best. So I started out with the idea of having a full-page, life-size portrait of the species, and the original paintings that are here in this exhibit show that what I did for those life-size paintings was paint them at double life-size. That was the easiest way to manage the calculations of size, to figure out what life-size was, double that, put that on the sheet of paper, twice the size of what would be reproduced in the book. I really enjoy painting larger than life. It gives me a lot more freedom to be kind of loose with the brush strokes and less picky, less caught up in the minutia. I can use a larger brush and paint loosely, and when it's reduced to appear in the book, then it appears at life size, and the detail tightens up a lot. The brush strokes that are big and a little impressionistic in the originals tighten up to look a lot more detailed in the reproduction. some like the great blue heron, it's a very large bird, and I thought I could do a head-on painting of the great blue heron facing directly at you, the way a frog or a fish would see it in its final seconds of life. I mean, the great blue heron the bill is really massive. The bill is very impressive. This long, heavy, dagger-like bill. So I decided I wanted to paint it in side view, in profile. And the only way to do that, life-size, to fit it onto an 8.5 by 11 page, was to have it stretch across 2 pages. So that's one illustration where the bird, most of it fits on one page, but the bill stretches all the way across onto the other page. The common loon is another species that it's such an iconic species of the North Woods. Everybody knows it. I wanted to include that in the book so that people would know what a loon was and get a sense of a little bit more about them. It's a large bird, so fitting that loon on the page life-size meant turning it so the adult loon is facing us, swimming toward us across the water, and most of the body fits on the page. The loon's head and neck takes up most of the painting. Loons have a really interesting nesting strategy. Loon chicks they can swim, but not as well as the adults almost from the moment they're hatched. But they can't catch their own food. So the adults carry the babies on their back. They swim around on the lake where they've nested, carrying the baby loons on their back. And this goes on for weeks. And gradually the baby loons, as they grow bigger, grow better feathers, they do more and more swimming and attempting to catch their own food. And as they get more proficient at catching food, they require less and less from the adults. But for the first, I think, 6 weeks or so, they spend a lot of time riding on the adult's back. And in some cases, they'll ride on the back of one adult while the other adult is catching fish, bringing fish up to the surface and feeding the young while they're riding on their other parent's back. So that was the scene that I wanted to illustrate for the common loon. And I wanted to illustrate really common species like red-winged blackbird. One of the most spectacular things that red-winged blackbirds do is the males display. They're named red-winged blackbird, obviously, because they have bright red patches on their wings, but those red patches, most of the time, they can be hidden, almost invisible or completely invisible under the black feathers of the body. When the male wants to display, it spreads its wings, puffs up those feathers, and sings, and the big red patches on its shoulders show up. And it directs that display towards the object, whether it's a rival male or a female, whether it's displaying to defend its territory or to impress a potential mate. The red feathers on its shoulders stand up, and that red, bright red show is projected forward. It's much less impressive from behind, but from the front, it's a very impressive display. And one of the things I tried to do in a lot of the illustrations was to relate these images to the human world. It's not common in nature illustration to include signs of humans, but I wanted to add a lot of that. So there's illustrations with bird feeders, buildings, and the red-winged blackbird, they often nest in culverts, roadside ditches, where there's just a little bit of water, a few reeds, maybe some willow saplings. That's where they'll nest. So obviously a lot of people see them when they're nesting right along the roadside. So I did the red-winged blackbird painting and included a guardrail and a stop sign in the background to suggest that they're nesting right by a road, right by an intersection. But I liked that it's kind of a metaphor for what the red-winged blackbird is puffing up its shoulders, maybe saying to a rival male, "Stop." And I liked the kind of metaphor of in the background there's a stop sign. I tried to blend the human world and the natural world in some of the paintings. People who enjoy nature, who really appreciate nature, I think there's a craving for connection to the natural world. Birdwatching is a way to do that. It's an excuse to set the alarm for 5 o'clock in the morning and go out no matter what the weather is and experience nature. And it gives us some targets, some quests, some sort of a to-do list of things we're looking for. You get up early in the morning and in early May to go see the migrating warblers that are just arriving. And that's the focus, but I think that the underlying motivation is really just to get out there and see the sunrise and see the trees leafing out and see the insects emerging and get a sense of the bigger cycles of nature. When we say we enjoy the connection to nature, it's digging in and understanding those patterns and getting deeper, and then being able to make predictions. And that's the reassuring, the comforting part of nature study is knowing that winter comes and spring comes and summer comes, and at each stage, at each day on the calendar, there are things that we know will happen. And being able to see those year after year is a real comfort. One of the ways that I think about this book is a way to introduce people to more of the depth of the details of what's going on in the birds' lives. It's that sense of connection and familiarity, I think, that really is really what people enjoy the most out of birdwatching and any kind of nature study. As I did the research and discovered more and more things about the birds, things that were new to me even after 50 years of studying birds, the heart of the book became short essays about all of these incredible adaptations and abilities that the birds have. Just amazing things that I learned along the way, that ground nesting birds like killdeer, in the breeding season, when they're sitting on their nest, incubating, they want to stay hidden. They're nesting on the ground, so they have to stay hidden from predators, and they do that through cryptic coloration. The eggs are camouflaged, the birds are camouflaged, but for predators that hunt by smell, like foxes, skunks, raccoons, those ground nesting birds, the chemical composition of the oil that they preen into their feathers changes during the breeding season, so they're odorless. They're undetectable by the mammals that are hunting at night. And I never knew that. That was such a revelation to learn that. And I had never really even thought about what, the visual camouflage works in the daytime, but they need another kind of camouflage for the predators that hunt by smell. And things like birds' feathers, again, the preen oil, the oil that birds preen into their feathers, I had always heard and assumed that was what made the feathers waterproof. It turns out that water rolls off a duck's back not so much because of the oil, but because of the structure of the feathers. It's the spacing of the barbs in the feathers that works kind of like Gore-Tex. That, again, was a total revelation to me, that a feather is waterproof water repellent because of the spacing of the barbs, and the oil helps to condition the feather and probably helps some to keep water from sticking, but it's mostly the structure that makes a feather waterproof. All of this is research that's been done over the last few decades and just not widely known. And the more I got into that research and read about it and discovered these things that I had no idea about, the more excited I was about putting all of that into the book and bringing all this information to an audience that I thought would really appreciate it.
So there you have it. There's our interview with David Sibley on exploring the natural world. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay tuned for more videos. Take care, and as always, remember, please help protect wildlife and help protect wild places. Cheers.